Welcome to Strange Scrolls, the show where we look into weird things happening on the internet. And this week, the weird things happening on the internet are us, PD.
Yeah, we are.
PD Bachmann, welcome to the show. You're a friend and also now a co-host of a show that we've accidentally gone viral with, essentially.
Yeah, we have a very weird catalog of things that we've created together over the years, and it's culminated into something good and successful, I think.
So for clarity's sake, we're going to dive a little bit into our past here, how we know each other, but then we're going to talk about why we are now the upcoming Survivor-based podcast and how we just signed a network deal for this season of Making the Merge. How do you think we start off talking how we know each other? Like meme pages, I guess?
Yeah, bizarre meme pages. Well, I was already, I was established in the meme game, and you were an up-and-comer. And I was like, I like what this guy's doing, making memes out of Jeff Goldblum. And I told my friend about it, and we somehow got all in a room together for a podcast, having never met each other before.
This is the part that is, I think, ridiculous that we even did it, right? Because the last thing you should do is meet strangers from the internet in person, unconfirmed, really. I had the Jeff Goldblum meme page. You were running a meme page, Deuteronomy memes.
Yep.
Am I allowed to
You're
dox
allowed
you?
to, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't sure how this went. You and Shama were doing the Church Stories podcast. There was just a conversation had where it was like, bring on Jonathan and talk about the Jeff Goldblum memes. And I happened to be like an hour from you guys at a wedding. I'm going to leave this wedding rehearsal. So I show up at Shama's house. He lets me in the house, and we walk to a back room. We record what some might say is one of the most legendary episodes of Church Stories podcast.
Yeah, it was voted episode of the year.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Our cold meeting each other was episode of the year.
Which is why you and I aren't friends off mic. That's what I keep telling people.
We refuse to speak unless it's about business,
In fact, the fact that we're even on this episode right now is we just wanted to hang out, but we didn't know how.
No, actually, me and Jonathan, we played mini golf together virtually.
We went to VR church together as well. There's that video on this channel.
But about the podcast situation thing, we could have murdered you. You could have murdered us. That's just how it goes with meeting up with strangers on the internet.
PD, we have now taken all of our weird experiences of podcasting, memes, and social media. We wound it up into a tight-knit ball, and we threw it at high speed into the internet. Why don't you tell us how you kind of were coming up with this idea? You started a Survivor draft years ago.
I love sports, and to me, Survivor feels like a sport, and I always like to do – I love trying to predict what's going to happen with football. I love to do a fantasy football draft and be like, you know what, these are my guys, and I know this quarterback is going to do the best. And I was like, how do I do that with Survivor? So I hit up Chase, and I was like, hey, let's just go back and forth, me and you draft players, and whoever has the winner gets a trophy.
I like that it was just you two, by the way.
Yeah. It was 50-50 on winning the competition. So
the odds were not bad on any of those. No. Yet he still lost.
Yeah, and I picked the winner on my first pick. So it's like,
wow.
Regardless, I think I would have won, even if you and Kristen were there. But in that off season, I think I was just telling you about what we did. And you're like, dude, can we join?
Because Kristen and I had, over COVID, gotten really into Survivor. We had watched a ton of seasons. We were caught up. You tell me about this draft, and I was like, dude, I kind of want to be in it. And then I was like, hey, Kristen is now saying she would like to do this. So
me and Chase started with 44. Then we added you guys for 45, and the stakes were massively raised. Yep. I forgot how me and Chase decided the draft order the first time, but then we all get on FaceTime, the four of us. We put up a wheel to decide who gets to go first. It's a very official process,
We do this, and then, of course, Chase starts blowing up on YouTube. I've started my YouTube channel, and I'm gaining subscribers too. And he and I talk, and we're like, what if we made a video about this? It underperforms, PD. I'm just going to say it.
What did it do? 3,000 views, I think, is what it ended up with?
That's what it's at right now. And it's been out for months. I was just like, yes, you know what it is, but we're just going to keep doing the draft. Then you say, what if we did this as a podcast?
Which was stupid. I think,
Yeah.
probably. Based off the video I'm performing, there was like nothing for me to base like us doing all that work off of.
And this is where my mind was at, and Chase and I have even talked about this, that you were like, let's do a podcast, and my first thought is like, man, I don't know, like, but then at the same time that sounds fun, but it's just like extra to do. Little do I know, Chase is also having this battle where he's also like, am I going to do this thing? I don't know, maybe not. And you're just like, I think there's something here.
Because here is my thought process. We are going to discuss Survivor to the point of exhaustion, regardless. So we might as well record it.
Which is quite literally all the effort we put into season 1 was just hopping on, hitting record, and be like, I guess this mic works. We make the podcast. It was pretty quick, I think, that we start realizing like we have more listeners than we anticipated.
We did the first few weeks, and like Chase plugged it, and it sent some of his Pretty Little Liars fans. I know we had like a few people. We plugged it on our channel, so like a few people that knew us were like, okay, like I like Survivor, I'll go listen to that. But it wasn't many.
We decided, okay, we have an Instagram page, Making the Merge. Let's make a TikTok page, Making the Merge Pod, and start just clipping stuff. And Chase really killed it with that part of it. They started going crazy.
But that's the thing that I think like we should have realized. Maybe this did have a lot of potential, because whenever we start something, it's usually something weird. And then inevitably we start coming up with strategies on like, how do we take this weird thing further?
You and I both have kind of this meme page background where we think things are funny. You and I have also like co-written jokes and things like that in the past
for an awards monologue,
undisclosed bombed awards monologue.
Hey, it wasn't our fault he delivered the jokes bad.
We're not gonna say what it is, but I will tell you that every joke was said like a minister. Chase, he's done improv, all of this stuff. I think we just had a good idea of we wanted to make a funny podcast about Survivor.
Yeah, and I never had any concerns about like whether it would be funny or not.
We already were having just such a good time with it. And so we had a clip go very big, which was one of the players named Rome. From Survivor this past season was a villain. So, PD, I have some of the stats here, though, from Making the Merge, because we keep a pretty good eye on it, but I think that it's fun to kind of look at. And so what would you think the average view for one of our TikToks would be?
20,000 maybe.
Dude, what a guess.
Really? That's it?
Yeah, it's 20,000.
Wow, no. Dude, I'm Nostradamus. I've actually never looked at like the breakdown.
You're like one of those actors that's just like, sorry, I've never actually watched one of my own movies. Average likes on each post.
That I wouldn't know. Maybe like 500.
800 is the
Okay.
average. We're killing there. And so the thing is that altogether we have 261,000 likes.
That's pretty crazy. I mean, it was a game changer, because I was talking to Chase about like how could we promote this, and then I was thinking, if we did video like of us, no one would care.
It has to be the contestants.
Yeah, people like watching us, people they've never seen talk about Survivor, like they'd be like, who are these jabronis?
Who are these not contestants that for some reason started a podcast about Survivor?
Who are these armchair experts or like Monday morning quarterbacks?
That one's already taken. We can't say
sorry
armchair
about
expert
that.
on here. Dak Shepard's going to sue me.
But yeah, it's like, you know what? We got to do footage of the contestants, because like people are going to be hooked watching that, and then they're going to be like, oh, these guys are funny, and then go to the podcast, and it worked to perfection.
So, for example, PD, one of our videos is of the contestant Andy desperately trying to get, is it a key off of like a pole? Was that what he was doing?
Yeah, he's trying to cut a rope with a machete, with like a long pole with a machete on the end of it.
He's thrusting, trying to get this knife to cut through. And so we posted a clip of us talking about that, and a clip of him actually doing that, committing the act, right? And 2 million views.
That was the big week for us. I think it was like all in the same time period. We had like 3 videos, pretty much all involving Rome, and then one with Andy, and like they got over 100,000 each. And I think it boosted the pod listenership by like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times.
It was like 200, 300% that all of a sudden our listenership went up. Like it was actually insane. And that's about when we also met Brandon.
We did just get signed to his podcast network.
We went from no episodes to 17 episodes.
It's 18 or 19 now.
And then signed to a podcasting network. It's
unbelievable. Because, you know, we talked about the other podcasts we've done. Like, me and you have both been part of multiple podcasts that had long runs and never got anywhere near a deal.
Also, let's talk about what we have not done right with this podcast and why we beat the odds with it. Quality control is not what I would say is like our strongest thing here.
No.
We don't have a theme song yet, or we didn't.
Yeah, well, because that's the thing. I convinced you guys to do this podcast like not long before the season started. So it's kind of like, all right, hey, let's just jump into this and talk about the show and see what happens.
Not only that, but some weeks it's like one of us is coming in from our phone. Some of us are using AirPods that accidentally have a broken microphone. That would be me.
Like the week that our clips blew up, I was losing my mind trying to edit the delay out of Chase, like because Chase would talk and then we would hear it in like somebody else's thing, but I couldn't match them up, and eventually I just had to leave it. But then that episode ended up blowing up, so it was like it didn't matter anyway.
Yeah, no one cared. And that's what people keep saying about podcasts and about stuff is they're like, oh, in reality, if what you're saying is interesting, people are going to watch, or the people are going to listen.
Listen to our first episode. My audio is, I sound like I'm in a garbage can.
I forgot about that.
It's so bad.
I remember you sent it, and I was like, hey, PD, no offense, but it kind of sounds like you're in a hallway or something.
And I was like, you had to turn me way up to hear me, and Chase's audio is normal, and I was like, oh, this is a disaster. And then I was like, wait, what if I just plug the microphone into the computer? And
that would do it.
And then now we got this audio that we have right now. It's a game changer. I had an audio interface that I've had since I was like 12. And I was like, okay, I can just plug it in there. Like I plug in everything else. And apparently that thing is shot. And I know nothing about the technical aspect, apparently.
But PD, it actually makes me outrageously happy, though, that this podcast has done this. And we've just signed for our next season to be on Bramblejam Podcast Network, which is home of the Deck the Hallmark podcast.
They're way bigger than us, and we just got lucky that we got one of the hosts of that show into Survivor at all.
Well, okay, so and this is what I need to talk with Brandon about. Brandon is on the Deck the Hallmarks podcast. He was watching my YouTube, but he also knew me, and he knew you and Shama and Chase from Church Stories.
It was either that. I think he referenced Church Stories the other day. Did Brandon? So he
did.
He mentioned Chase being in the corner. I was like, wow, to know that, you would have had to have listened, because there was a time period where we had, stuck Chase in the corner as the producer. We called it Chase's Corner.
Yeah, where he belongs is what I keep saying.
Now he's gotten too much freedom and he won the whole draft.
This is what happens when someone becomes self-aware.
I think that all of that somehow led him to you and your YouTube. And then he saw you make a documentary about Survivor that 3,000 people watched.
The right person in that 3,000 is all it took. He's like, hey, look, I want to be on that podcast as a guest at some point. Like, I am obsessed with Survivor. So we all are like, yeah, that would be awesome. Like, we need to network with other people, get to know podcasters. Brandon's cool. Like, let's bring him on. I end up not able to be on the podcast. And then I'm like bombing in randomly in and out of the episode here.
But at least when you bombed in, you had headphones on and there was no echo like there was with Chase. So your bombing was better than Chase's.
Lesson learned. We were a few episodes in.
Yeah.
But Brandon handled it well. He handled it like a champ.
And he came on, and he was great on the podcast, and
Yep.
it just so happens that later on he's like he texted Chase, I wish it would make sense for me to join this podcast, and I was like, well, hey, let's make it make sense.
Let's make it make sense, Brandon.
Let's
do it.
And then after just, we had an emergency conference call.
You've had some collaboration with Shama and Chase that was really successful, but I think that there's no doubt this podcast is like one of the weirdest things to suddenly have to have like serious conversations about.
Yeah. It'd be like if me and you were having board meetings for the VR Church documentary.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm driving to Walmart to do a pickup order. I park, and all of a sudden my phone is ringing, and I look, and I'm like, oh, Chase is calling me. That's already weird, And so I answer, and Chase is like, hold on a second, I'm connecting PD.
For what should have been just like a throwaway idea that 12 people listen to.
Yeah.
This is what happens with us. Like we get into something, we get invested, we start putting a bunch of work into it, and then, for other stuff, it's been successful, and it didn't seem like it mattered all that much, like the random Instagram pages we made. That,
yeah.
It's like, it's cool in a vacuum, but this feels different. You know what I mean?
Well, this feels different because we've also now had, like, interactions with contestants.
Yeah.
Like Saul from last season was one of our favorites. He's listening to our podcast and is a fan.
We bring Brandon on, we sign the paperwork, and then in less than a week, I play our podcast and I hear John Cena's voice doing a Honda ad.
And I heard Ryan Seacrest doing a casino ad.
And then I got one that was completely in Spanish, and I was like, this is great.
We've had Ryan Seacrest and John Cena on Making the Merge now.
Yeah, so shout out to Brandon for that. We also are going to get access to his studio now, so it's just like, yeah, failing upward. Like, we talked about our mistakes early on. Like I said, the first episode, audio was terrible.
Yeah.
The second episode, audio was bad. The content was funny, but audio is still not great. A lot of problems in different spots. And then week 3, me and Chase are affected by a hurricane.
All I know is that you're like, hey, hurricanes hit. We have no internet. We have no power. Also, a tree's falling on Chase's house. Like, there's just all this stuff going on.
Just calamity in South Carolina.
And so at that point, it was like Kristen and Jonathan record an episode. And we're like, we're going to record, I guess, what we can. And it happened to be 17 minutes. And we were like, well, I don't know. I guess the listeners get 17 minutes of us talking about Survivor.
You look at the podcast appearances. Me and you were the most consistent. So we have that. Yeah.
You and me the most consistent. Kristen, the most level-headed. She and I are now, it's just one team in the Wright household because I'm so bad at Survivor drafting.
I'll put it in NFL terms. Jonathan is like, if the Cleveland Browns were like, hey, we've had a rough go of it. We're going to go join the Patriots.
Okay, so you hear us. Go listen to Making the Merge Season 2. Go check it out. We're having a blast, and thanks for watching. And thank you, PD.
You're welcome. PD out.